All right, we are live on the internets. Welcome to the Magic Internet Money Podcast, Peter. As soon as I went live, Peter dropped out. That's hilarious. Peter is on a small island right now, and he's having internet issues. So we're going to try to get this done, but it seems like we might have problems. He's actually like using his cell phone as his internet because his Wi-Fi sucks. So he's using his mobile data, and it kind of cuts in and out. Let me try to remove him and add him back. He lost StreamYard. Okay, rejoin us, Peter. So obviously this is going to be edited out in the audio version of the podcast, but I can see comments. For those who are watching, Peter Kroll is the creator of the Bitcoin paper wallets. So if you've ever used a paper wallet generator that you can print out and then you scan the QR code and it shows your public key and your private key on this paper wallet, Peter's the guy that created these ages ago. And we've been chatting back and forth on Telegram and WhatsApp over the last few years because Peter...
Hey, Brad. Sorry about that.
Man.
Another technical difficulty.
That's
I
fine.
had to turn off the auto reconnect to my Wi-Fi from the laptop. So,
well, now you're back, and I was just saying that you're the creator of the paper wallet.
yes.
Was it Bit Wallet or
BidAddress? BidAddressorg.
And when did you make that?
Remember the domain name because there's all these clone versions of the site, and with different domain names that some of those people are like scammers. So I created BidAddressorg in 2011, in the first 3 months that I got into Bitcoin. So
awesome.
I found out about Bitcoin when it was on Slashdot, in spring, April, May timeframe, 2011. And then just a month later on the forums, there was some miner who got hacked and he lost 25,000 Bitcoins. And I only had a tiny amount of Bitcoins, but that started getting me paranoid. Like, how's this thing going to work out if I want to hold my Bitcoins for 10 years? And, I was an expert at JavaScript at the time, and I understood the Bitcoin technology, and these keys could just be put on paper with QR codes. And the most widely understood language is JavaScript. The browser is the simplest platform for everyone. So I kind of went and solved a problem for myself. And then by September, I decided to post it on the forums, and guys asked me to open source it. So I did. And, the rest has been history. I worked on it for about 5 years, and I haven't done any updates since late 2016. But, it's a solid project that at this point doesn't really demand too many feature changes.
Yeah. Oh, and the cool thing is that, you're kind of unknown in the space. Like, you don't go on a lot of podcasts. You don't have a podcast yourself, but you're very knowledgeable. And I enjoyed chatting with you. And, together we are in this this mastermind group, I guess you could call it, of different crypto people. A lot of them are like creators of altcoins and stuff like that. So we get exposed to a lot of kind of like arguments, like the big block argument, and like
sure.
Bitcoin is not the only one that should win arguments, and all these different altcoiner arguments, because like 80% of the people in the group are like creators of coins or something like that.
Yeah.
And we met at Satoshi Roundtable a couple of years ago, and that Satoshi Roundtable has kind of turned into that as well. Like, a lot of people that were early Bitcoiners ended up creating their own coins or supporting altcoins in some way. And you and I always kind of like land on the same side of the argument. So it's good to finally have a conversation with you about that, because we both got into Bitcoin around the same time, or in 2011. And I think you got into Bitcoin kind of probably for the same reasons as me, for low fee, decentralized money. At least that's kind of what I get from your conversations in the chats.
Well, definitely. Like, I'm kind of libertarian leaning. I wouldn't say I'm a full-fledged libertarian, but I kind of have uncles that are of that mindset, and I heard a lot of that philosophy growing up. And my grandma was into numismatic coin collecting, and I just remember being a little kid, like she got me into collecting coins. And when you look at that Canadian silver dollar and it says $1 on it, and then your grandma tells you, no, but it's like worth $20 or $25, whatever she had paid at the time. And then that thought didn't just pass me by, it like stuck with me and haunted me for like many, many years. And, that gets you to dig into like the Federal Reserve and all those things. And so I like Bitcoin because it's a hard money that supports freedom. And I think the challenge with altcoins and the big block versus small block thing is that, to some extent, we're all like big babies. Like we want the vision of Bitcoin that we thought it would be in 2011 or 2012 to turn out. But it's just like, this is kind of like an organic grassroots thing. And it's a technology where store of value properties might be stronger and more natural than medium of payment. But obviously, it has no value if you can't transfer it from person to person.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like a lot of the struggle is like that, like what we thought it would be and then what it turned out to be, And when the big block war was like at its height, let's say just before Bitcoin Cash forked off as an altcoin, it wasn't really clear like what the point was of trying to like onboard new people when we were at like $20 fees, $50 fees. And I think as Bitcoiners, like dismissing altcoins, like we haven't like got the memes and the narrative like down really well. Like, why is it a waste of time and money to like try to store in Litecoin or in Bitcoin Cash, And then there might be the two sides of the coin where it's kind of like we need Bitcoin Cash and Ethereum and Litecoin to exist so that Bitcoin can be pure Bitcoin value transfer.
So I'm just going to post this here. Somebody said, "Hey, Alpha." So I guess that's someone that's in the group that we were talking about. And this person says, "You're libertarian while using Bitcoin," which is true. But then it also goes into your point that you're kind of making there, which I struggled with, honestly, because I have those libertarian roots as well from supporting Ron Paul and like learning about hard money and libertarianism through Ron Paul's presidential campaigns. I believe in the free market, and it's a free open source technology, so anybody can fork off and then compete. And it was a kind of like a cognitive dissonance moment for me when we were all calling for Roger Ver to get arrested because he's saying Bitcoin Cash is Bitcoin. Because I'm like, at the same time, I'm philosophically leaning towards, obviously Bitcoin Cash is not Bitcoin, but he's misselling Bitcoin Cash as if it's Bitcoin, tricking all these new people that are coming into the space. So there's two like really different philosophical tracks you can go down. You can go down, it's a free market, anybody should be allowed to do anything, it's an open source technology, nobody controls it. So if you can convince everybody in the world that this new thing is Bitcoin, then really you should be allowed to do that. But then the market should be able to react and punish those people that are lying and mis-selling and all that. But then on the other side, there's a whole like really emotional, aggressive response to somebody attacking Bitcoin that you're just like enraged by. At least I was enraged by Bitcoin.com's like selling of Bitcoin Cash as Bitcoin and publishing all these lies about what's Bitcoin, what isn't Bitcoin. And it's like the free market has spoken. Over the last 2 years, we've seen that pretty much it's been settled. And I'm way less triggered by Roger Ver now because it kind of seems a little pathetic now that he keeps posting these lies on Twitter and stuff. It's kind of like he had his shot, he failed, and now he's just making Bitcoin Cash, like adding every other look mom, I got this feature too, like
Yeah.
now there's tokens. Now it's like they're not even using the proper algorithms anymore. They changed up the algorithms. They're They're just using all kinds of new blockchainy finagly
Yeah.
dangles tossed on it so that it appeals to as wide a base as possible. But they're still
Well,
trying to
yeah,
say it's Bitcoin.
I've been disappointed, by the technology path Bitcoin Cash took, but I kind of see the whole like, Roger believes in the vision thing, but at the same time, he's forcing everyone who's a true Bitcoiner who understands Bitcoin to like be sharp on what is Bitcoin. So like,
right.
The reason like Luke Dasher says like everyone has to run a full node and stuff like that, it's almost like I can say for guys like me and you that, got into this technology now like 9 years ago, it's like Bitcoin has given us time freedom, but like all the freedoms aren't there because like if my neighbors are still like slaving away to pay mortgages and they can't afford the fines that the government's put on when they blockade the roads, then like how free am I really? So it's not just about teaching people to like buy Bitcoin. They have to understand what is Bitcoin, and like it's the whole fake news versus real news thing. And like a lot of people think they have Bitcoin, but it's just like in their Coinbase wallet, and like they don't have the actual keys, and like that's a whole thing. And like a lot of people, they want to use commercial bank money to buy or sell Bitcoin. And I started to realize that people need to understand that to some extent, adopting Bitcoin is like a one-way street. Like you're exiting to a parallel system, and more so it's going to be true that you're not going to like turn that back into like what they consider traditional financial assets. And even like, well, this will get into some topics maybe we'll touch on in a bit, but like tiny houses versus mortgages, and like how hard it is to buy real estate with Bitcoin. So basically there's a symbiosis between the real estate market and commercial banks right now. And for example, because of this COVID-19 crisis, Aruba, which is a neighboring island, had to put in strict capital controls. So the central bank in their FAQ said, like, if you want to buy property from a non-resident, you essentially can't do that because they're not going to affect the payment overseas outside of their central bank network. So that just is a law now that opens up opportunity for non-residents of Aruba to sell their property with Bitcoin. And in these early days, it's almost like bartering, like you have to meet the coincidences, which is really tough. But I think there's a lot of high net worth individuals, merchant class people who have bought real estate. And the more that they understand Bitcoin, or their children understand Bitcoin, having 30, 40 different pieces of real estate scattered around the world that are illiquid is not as powerful as having Bitcoin, which is like super liquid.
Right. You mean for like high net worth individuals who are trying to diversify outside of fiat or stocks? Then
well, so
Bitcoin...
Venezuela has like one of the top 4 oil reserves in the world. Like there's different arguments of whether it's number 1, number 2, number 3, or number 4. And so in theory, they should be like the richest country in the world, but there's utter chaos there. And there was like an exodus of 2 million people. So all of those 2 million people, the top, whatever, 10% that had money, they're buying real estate in every foreign jurisdiction that will allow them, whether it's Curacao, Aruba, America, Panama, Spain, and then they're just, it's not like they're buying a home for themselves. Like they need to buy many, many properties, and with like disregard to whether they can rent them or anything like that. It's just a pure store of value case.
So yeah, that's like one of the use cases for Bitcoin that is probably the strongest use case is storing value. And this person says 9K per day to 51% attack BCH. What a joke. And, that is a real measure of a blockchain and a cryptocurrency is how secure it is. And I think me and you will both agree that what gives value to Bitcoin and all cryptocurrencies for the most part is the decentralized properties, the ability for you to run your own node and really have a vote in the say of the coin. And just like BitTorrent, where they can't, they've made downloading movies illegal, but they can't enforce everybody that downloads movies. So they can't enforce the law. If they tried to make Bitcoin illegal, they wouldn't be able to enforce it. And they did try to do that in 2013 when they went after Silk Road and Charlie Shrem and tried to basically attack Bitcoin, but they realized, okay, wait a second, we can't attack Bitcoin, so we have to attack the businesses. But when you're looking at other cryptocurrencies like BCH, for example, the security is a joke, and it doesn't actually even need mining anymore, really, because they cheated with checkpoints. So now they have these
kind of proof of stake.
Yeah, it's basically like a money printer for Roger Ver and Jihan Wu and his friends to print more BCH coins because they control the network. And like the market has spoken that there is some value to that. Ethereum as well. It's more decentralized than BCH is.
So Ethereum was like, I think that's the true big blockchain, and Vitalik was saying like fees should never be over 5 cents. But yesterday I sent an Ethereum transaction with USDT and it was like 50 cents.
Is it that high already on Ethereum?
Yeah, like a couple weeks ago it was 5 to 10 cents, but it's like Bitcoin is now $3 to $6. So it's
is Bitcoin fees that high? Last time I sent Bitcoin was last week, and it was only like 40 cents or something. It looks like Peter, we've lost Peter again. We'll continue that conversation in a minute, but I'm going to address some of the comments in the chat while we wait for Peter to come back. Somebody says fiat stores more value than Bitcoin, and that's true. The M2 money supply of fiat is something like $70 trillion. Real estate actually stores more value than fiat. So it's not about how much value Bitcoin stores now. It's about what Bitcoin can store in terms of value, and Bitcoin can store all value really, because it's Bitcoin is 100 million units in each piece of Bitcoin. So it's plenty of value can be stored in Bitcoin. And what were we saying there, Peter, before you cut out? You were talking about Ethereum fees, and I was saying Bitcoin fees I thought were not that high.
Oh yeah, so if it's like 2 UTXOs, maybe it cost me $6. 1 UTXO, $3. So I'm sending transactions.
Is that to confirm right away, or is that to?
Yeah, super high priority confirmation.
See, I always wait. I always just put like the lowest Satoshi per byte or the economy selection if you're in like a bread wallet or something like that. I always just wait. Like what? I don't feel like you need to get your Bitcoin if it's expensive, unless you're doing trading, right? And then if you're doing trading, you want a confirmation immediately. And usually if you're doing trading, you've got high value, like thousands or tens of thousands or more of dollars. And if you're a fund or a high net worth person, you got like 100,000 or $1 million or $10 million in that transaction. You should be using Liquid Network in that case, because then it's instant, cheap transactions between exchanges. Like settlement time, I think, is 10 seconds or something. And obviously there's a different security profile when you're using Liquid Network, which is like, for people who are listening that may not understand like what we're talking about. So there's the big block and the small block. Bitcoin was trying to retain decentralization. It kept the ability for everybody to run a node. The way that we thought we could scale Bitcoin was with second layers and side chains. Second layers being things like Lightning Network, where it can scale infinitely, basically, as long as, over, say, 10 years, it can scale pretty much to anything that, even cars paying each other to pass each other on the highway, like automated transactions, micro Satoshi transactions, stuff like that. That's Lightning Network can do that eventually. That's a second layer. Satoshi, Hal Finney, these guys used to talk about that on the Bitcoin forums, that second layers would be the way to do it. Yes, it will maybe have some centralization. There may be some banks that form that are like Bitcoin banks that kind of centralize some of the liquidity, and that's a bit of a concern, but you don't have to use that. You can use direct to peer-to-peer channels. So
Well, okay. So for me, like, if you're selling to someone for cash, sometimes they want that transaction to confirm really fast because maybe they're moving it onto some other platform and then they don't want the exchange rate slippage. So it's worth it to pay $3 or $6
if it's a big transaction.
Yeah.
But like for the average person, right, that's not going to be doing $1,000, $10,000 transaction or sending the whole Bitcoin or 6.15 Bitcoin or whatever your meme number is that you want to choose.
Yeah, if you're receiving and you're just going to hodl it, then you can wait 12 hours or whatever to receive your Bitcoin. Or if you're just putting it on a platform for yourself and you're not going to borrow against the Bitcoin or trade it instantly, like you're like, oh, I'll just send it and in case I can buy the dip a few days from now or something like that, then yeah, there's no reason not to do low priority. And I think,
but if you're doing that method,
well,
if you're doing the method that you're talking about where you're trading, right, wouldn't you just want to use liquid or something else if you don't want to pay the high fee? Let's say fees go to $100 like they did in December 2017 for like a day. You know, there was a time, I think, when I paid one time, I paid $100 fee. And I mean, that sucked, but it was worth it for me to pay that fee because I was making a transaction that was economically worth paying $100 fee. I've wired money at the bank before and paid $100. So it's not like surprising that I would do that. But that the argument that I do relate with, and, you know, kind of I feel a little bit cognitive dissonance about, is I got into this in 2011 like you did, when fees were basically zero because the miners were just altruistically mining zero fee transactions just to spread the network and evangelize it. But obviously Satoshi put the fees in there for a reason. The code was there, like the ability for Bitcoin to have fees was there. And why did we think that fees would never happen is kind of like the way I've been thinking.
People also worry about fees. Like they're internalizing it in the Satoshi per byte thing, and they're not thinking, like, the way I see it is there's a cost to send Bitcoin, and if the fee goes really high, then you're going to look for like fee saving opportunities. So that can be like, wow, the Bitcoin network is super congested right now. I'm going to put on my altcoin wallet, I'm going to put $1,000 of ETH, $500 of Litecoin, $500 of Bitcoin Cash. Like, I bought some rubber bands off Haven and they were like $3 shipped regular mail. Well, the Bitcoin fee is $3. And then the Haven app tells me like, hey, maybe you want to use an altcoin. And then I just go to some coin switching, you know, shapeshift style thing, buy a little bit of Litecoin and use that. And then it's just, whether you use Litecoin or whether you use Bitcoin Cash, that's a political statement. Really.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, that whole concept is a political statement to Bitcoiners, right? Like, most Bitcoin maximalists will be like totally against altcoins being used at all because altcoins are competing with Bitcoin and the pre-mines and all the incentives and all that stuff, the philosophical stuff behind altcoins versus Bitcoin. They just won't use it. And, you know, Bitcoin has been trying to use side chains and second layers to scale and have lower fees, but we're obviously not there right now, or we're ready. It's frustrating that we're not able to use Lightning.
That's the frustrating thing of, like, Bitcoin didn't have the same UX today as it had like in 2011. And then, you know, the whole cohort of 2011 has two different points of view, the big or the small block. But I think if we step back, you know, beyond personal opinion, the market has said, like, if Bitcoin fees are too high, then you use an alternative. And one alternative is Lightning, the other is Ethereum, Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin, Dash, Dogecoin, and Monero. And actually, that's the full list. So, like, nobody is using any other coins for payments. And in December 2017, if you were buying a t-shirt from a site that took Bitcoin or whatever, like, all the payment processors were just taking Bitcoin. So you didn't have this ability to do like a Gresham's Law choice and say, like, hey, let me buy a little bit of silver, some crappy money, and use that at the market. And like, silver never like defeated gold, and it always was there to like help gold. And people, like, we're not making like our own opinions. We're like wondering like, what is everyone else thinking? Like a few days ago when a 2009 transaction moved, and it's like, is it Satoshi or is it not? Well, what matters is like, what do people think it is, not what it actually is, right? So what's the problem with like buying $200 worth of Litecoin when there's a crazy Bitcoin fee event, right? So like in my mind, because I'm using crypto all the time and I'm kind of like politically or religiously trying to pay with crypto over Visa, MasterCard, or bank transfers or whatever, if I know that fees are getting really congested on Bitcoin, then it's obvious to me to have some spending money in the top 3 cryptos. And like, I don't see that as a threat. Like, it's just kind of like, why did Chrome beat Firefox? And it goes into, there's like a cohort of technical people that people rely on that geek friend of theirs that tells them things. So like, it's kind of difficult and long-winded to explain, but like Bitcoin Cash is not the same as Bitcoin SV, where Bitcoin SV is still using like the same proof of work technology as Bitcoin. But Bitcoin Cash, by putting this 10 block reorg limit, it's turned it into a quasi proof of stake. So you get a few S9 miners and you just start mining like really far back in the history where, you know, like let's say 5 S9 miners or 10 S9 miners could like create a fork. Now you've created that fork, and the fork to go down in difficulty, it's like averaging the last 144 blocks or something like that. So if you're the only one mining it, the difficulty is coming down like super fast. And then your investment in the 5 or 10 ASICs allows you to extend the chain indefinitely. Then you set up a bunch of like full nodes on Amazon that respect your version of the chain, not the other version of Bitcoin Cash, which is ordained by the Pope Armory, Sachet. And, you know, I think he's a good guy and everything, but every altcoin has a Pope, and that's what makes Bitcoin different. And like, maybe that's the way we can explain why altcoins suck. You know, like we got to improve our narratives, but you know, it's not 9K per day to attack Bitcoin Cash. Like it's, you know, a trivial amount of hardware running for a little bit of time and a bunch of full nodes that you're spending $300-400 on in the Amazon cloud. And then you've created like a permanent split. So anyone who's downloading Bitcoin Cash and like syncing from Genesis can get on the wrong side of the network. And it's just, you're creating a permanent low cost disruption. And it's funny. The same, yeah, it's the same attack that you would do.
Do you think
on
people must be doing that?
There's a lot of attacks that people aren't doing. You know, it's just, there's a lot of white hats and there's no incentives, right? Like if you're an old school Bitcoiner and you see this or that problem, like what's the incentive to roll up your sleeve and embarrass this or that altcoin, which we do see it happening. And like, maybe by me putting out there that idea, like someone has enough time to like bother, but like, you know,
I guess the reason why people aren't,
I'm entertained to do, you know,
people aren't doing that right now because it's kind of been proven out that like Roger and, you know, was leading this narrative, this push, Roger and Craig Wright, and Roger elevated Craig Wright as Satoshi, held the Satoshi's Vision conference, was like pushing Roger, Craig Wright, CSW, as if he was Satoshi, because at the time CSW and Calvin Ayre were on the same side as Roger.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think CSW probably scammed Calvin Ayre.
Probably, yeah, probably. Yeah. But so Craig Wright and Roger were both pushing this narrative that users don't matter, it's the miners that make the decisions, and Blockstream was like taking over Bitcoin and cheating Nakamoto consensus basically by not allowing the miners to fork the chain to increase the block size. And so they were using this philosophical argument saying that the Satoshi's vision was just destroyed with Bitcoin Core, you know, like, or Blockstream Core, or whatever the heck they were saying, these dumb narratives that they were saying back then. And then as time went by, all these egotistical, like, I guess like real like egomaniac people that really wanted power and control over Bitcoin, they didn't get their way. And rather than just deciding to let that go and work for the good of Bitcoin, they just took their ball and went to the other court, and they created Bitcoin Cash. And then, because then it's all the like egotistical people that are fighting with each other, fighting with the Bitcoiners, all now in the same group, they forked and they split and they started fighting with each other, trying to get power.
Yeah.
And they've went and cheated so everything they accused Bitcoin of doing, they just did to each other. And it's cannibalized the value of Bitcoin Cash into BSV and BCH. And all these egotistical people now are over there, and they totally made themselves hypocrites, because everything they said that Bitcoin was doing, they did 10x to themselves. And that's so
they've
I think
themselves, and they've misunderstood institutional capture. So like there was maybe a chance, and that's why Gavin Andresen called it like the last hard fork, because he kind of knew that maybe it wouldn't even happen, because Bitcoin is really trying to defeat like an age-old problem, which is institutional capture. So politics, every institution keeps getting captured by some cartel, and they ruin things for the masses. And that's basically the threat of like a 2 megabyte hard fork upgrade, the Bitcoin Classic, Bitcoin Unlimited, SegWit 2x. And I was like under the belief that if we could all upgrade together and there was no split, then we would have had the 95% consensus, and that would have been.
We lost Peter there. We'll give him a second to come in. I think he was going to say that he was kind of on the same page as even Adam Back was, where it's not that small blocks are the only way to do it and big blocks were evil or terrible, or bigger blocks were terrible. It wasn't that. It was just that not doing it in consensus was the problem. And the side that Peter was talking about, like the SegWit 2x side, like they didn't want to just do 2 megabytes. They wanted to go 2, then 4, then 8, then 16, then 32, then eventually gigablocks. So that's where the problem arise when these guys wanted to do that without consensus. So we'll give Peter another second. Oh, he's dropped. I'm just going to hit him a message. Dropped. And I was on that same side too. I mean, I thought that there's nothing wrong with a 2 megabyte block or a 4 megabyte block. It's just a matter of if it's done in consensus. And the problem was that we did not have consensus, and that's what caused a split. And if you have a hard fork that's not in consensus, that's going to cause problems. So the hard fork that happened was BCH, and it's then split into BSV. So I'm gonna I'm a little kerfuffled here. It's the first time doing a podcast like this where the guest keeps disconnecting. Hold on, he's back. Hold on. Okay, you're back. You're back. So I was just explaining your side because you cut out all of that. I was explaining what I think you were going to say was you were going to be on the side of it's okay to fork to upgrade to 2 megabytes if everybody agreed. But because everybody didn't agree, that was what you came back down to the small block side, because you want to, like, consensus is more important than 2 megabytes or 4 megabytes or 8 megabytes.
Yes, exactly. The store of value property and the not having the institutional capture. And that's why Luke Dasher talks about the need for smaller blocks. And honestly, like Jameson Lopp has the best blog post on the technicals for the small block position, which summarized is Bitcoin only works on one hard disk. Like it is not scalable to a multi-disk scenario. There's not enough people like on Earth that know how to run those like RAID array clusters. And it's hard to find that extra capacity in the cloud. So if you're building a DApp, a second layer solution, Lightning, like you need to like connect to a full node. If you're doing an Omni style like op return where you timestamp something in, or Factom and PegNet, like the base layer is like DNS. It has to be small and nimble, and you need to be able to run that on like a laptop. And we had like a change from hard disk drives to solid state disks, and solid state disks are kind of like small relatively. So like the growth of the blockchain has to be less than Moore's law. not like keeping pace with it, because if it exceeds Moore's law, then it can be institutionally captured, because some government miner will just fill up the blocks with spam and try to capture the network.
So with
nobody's running Ethereum. We're all hodling it, but nobody's running it.
So talking about Ethereum and bringing it back to your point about Bitcoin Cash and running the node that could fork permanently, the reason why I think that nobody's doing that or even bothers to do that with Bitcoin Cash is because Bcash is centralized, and if you run a fork, it doesn't matter because the checkpoint.
It's hard fork city.
Yeah. It's like, like you said, the Pope.
You might as well do proof of stake, and So what happens if a proof of stake blockchain goes bad? You go to the block explorer that's like running from the centralized developer.
Yeah.
And like in Bitcoin, there isn't that thing. And that's why in the white paper, it talked about like the heaviest chain, and Bitcoin's evolved since the white paper. So like going back to this argument, like Satoshi didn't describe like pooled mining. And there's actually a way to do the cryptography, which tries to make pool mining bad. So like if you need a private key to like sign the proof of work, so after the proof of work, the key has to be signed, then it's hard to like share that over a pool. And apparently some altcoin tried this, and then the altcoin miner pool operator will just like share the private key or whatever. So like the security and trustlessness gets even worse. So pooled mining wasn't in the white paper. It's an important, necessary thing. Bitcoin it's not as decentralized as there is mining pools. It's decentralized as there is energy generation facilities. So like people forget that like Wall Street can run on one server rack because there's no energy requirement. So like everyone wants to talk to everyone in the fastest amount of time, and that's you put every company's server on one rack. And the thing with Bitcoin is you cannot do that. So any sovereign government goes in, confiscates miners, takes over the hydro dams, but that's just one of 200 jurisdictions. And like people think like, oh, there's so much hashing in China, but like there's people outside of China hashing into those Chinese pools because of time delay issues. And the Chinese know that they're under the thumb of their government, and they're trying to expand to Texas and Canada and all these other places. So it's an uncapturable system, and like it's more secure the more people that are mining and hashing. And so like part of my philosophy, like when you've been in Bitcoin long enough, someone will ask you, or you have to ask yourself, like, is fiat going to go away? And a lot of times I would say, no, fiat's not going to go away. But the more I think about it, fiat might go away or be relegated to a very small set of functions, like in Venezuela. Like no one, it's like when they print the new issue of currency on the 1st of the month, by the 30th of the month, it's worth less. Mm-hmm. So even though paper money or electronic bank transfer might have some advantages, if you get new fiat on the 1st of the month and you buy crypto and then you sell the crypto back on the end of the 30th day of the month, you have more in fiat. So like That's how it works in Venezuela. They take out a loan on the 1st of the month, pay it back on the 30th of the month, either through dollars or through Bitcoin. So the more people, like this whole COVID-19 thing is sending out the meme that like people need to learn how to like sprout seeds and like grow vegetables and fruits in their garden and like be less dependent on the system. And Bitcoin's the same thing. So like if everyone's using Coinbase, then I'm not free as a Bitcoiner. So like I have this kind of like moral duty to tell people like you need to run a full node. You need to run a mobile wallet with your own keys. Like there's steps to it, right? So there's mobile wallets that will like connect to like a central server, or there's other ones that'll just connect to like random Electrum light clients, or like the Bloom filter thing that's still available on Bitcoin full nodes. And that gives you increased sovereignty. And then if you set up those data center nodes for yourself, because you usually can't connect to your home ISP because of port blocking, then you get more sovereignty. And if you have solar power,
you're talking about like advanced elite Bitcoiners now, like setting up your own ISP, getting on the solar grid,
and I was just about to say to get satellite internet and
get
like
launch
have
your own
a small
satellites.
miner, have a small miner in your house. So like it seems funny for guys like me and you, but like the next generation that's under 10 right now, that's like every day is on an iPad and they had to just do like months of remote schooling. This is going to be like in their wheelhouse. And if like freedom is just setting up a few nodes, you know, like then it's only education separating us from that.
It's true.
Yeah.
Education and UX, like the user experience of Bitcoin right now is really difficult. I just finished a month-long kind of like experiment with my mom where she's like 62, 63 years old. She doesn't have a computer. She just has a phone. She's very technically unsavvy, like any normal boomer is, right? So for the last like 8 years, she's always messaging me every once in a while, being like, "Oh, I wish I bought Bitcoin, you know, a year ago, or I wish I bought Bitcoin when it was $50, like you said, or wish I bought Bitcoin when it was $500, like you said." She texts me these all the time, so every time I'm like, "Well, you know," the other thing is she's very like poor. She doesn't have money. She doesn't have a lot of money. She doesn't have disposable income. She's got debt. She got bills. She's like the average person, right? The average boomer with a lot of debt and not a lot of assets and making low incomes. So I was like trying to convince her to just take little bits of her money and buy Bitcoin, but she never would. It was too hard. It was whatever. Life basically. And so she finally, like when I started posting about the halving coming up, for some reason that was enough to motivate her to want to get some. And plus the price had risen again, right? And then when the COVID thing hit and the markets crashed, it sort of made more people aware that, wait a second, just like you said, this is a new way to think about money now. Like they're literally printing trillions and said they will print unlimited amounts. So maybe I shouldn't have so much of this stuff, or maybe I should get something else that may protect against that. So she started the process to buy Bitcoin, and it literally took her a month because it's so clunky and hard to buy Bitcoin and put it on your own wallet. And that's why, you know, and she was stopping and she would say, "I'm so frustrated. This is worse than quitting smoking. Like, I don't want to do this anymore." And then a few days later, she texts me again. She's like, "I'm ready to try again, son. Okay, what do I got to do?" And I'm like, "Okay, you got to go to bullbitcoin.com and get some private Bitcoin, you know?" So it took her a month, but finally she got it to her own green address, like Blockstream's green wallet. She got it to that. She's got her seed keys. She got her $1,000 of Bitcoin that she got from the government money. So we got this, you know, the stimulus money coming out. She took like a quarter of it, bought Bitcoin with it. So I was like so happy that people are getting that.
So I'm convinced that there's no replacing things like what you just did. So it's,
so you don't think that the UX is ever going to get good enough for Bitcoin that it'll be like Coinbase, but done properly with sovereignty and your own
no,
keys?
well, I'm not saying that. I do, like, I'm a hopeful and I think the UX will get better, but it's just like in school, they're not teaching you about money, whether it's fiat money or gold or Bitcoin. So like this person-to-person thing, you know, which for example, like Roger Ver's doing good in his jurisdictions, like, you know, verbally like tipping taxi drivers or whatever. And sometimes I like take that as an inspiration. I'm just doing it, you know, with the real McCoy. And like, I think we learn a lot when we try to teach newbies, like whether they're senior citizens or not. And like most of my time and effort these days is like in that pursuit. So I set up a website called btccuracao.com. I have a WhatsApp group where like I'm providing support to retailers, and I'm doing it like in the full sovereignty sense. So I'm saying to them, like, I'm not a service provider. You know, I'm just a guy you can lean on and ask questions to. And it's important that you take Bitcoin onto your own mobile wallet. So for example, I did a lot of research, like I tested every single wallet that doesn't expose you to shitcoins or altcoins. And it comes down to Blue Wallet and Mycelium are the best for newbies. So Mycelium is good for merchants because there's all the foreign currencies and the UX works where it, you know, you can mimic a point of sale experience where the cashier says, hey, it's $13 Canadian, or it's 13 guilders, Curacao money, you know what I mean? And repeat for like all the countries in the world. And Blue Wallet, like when you're asking for money or whatever, you have to put in the Bitcoin amount, like not necessarily the dollar amount or something like that. So Mycelium's good for merchants, and then Blue Wallet is super easy for consumers. Like I tested, it works with BitPay and all the big coin processors and stuff like that. And then I'm cognizant of the fact that we are going to get back into where like fees were $20 or $50. So that's not going to be good if I want to pay for a restaurant meal with Bitcoin. So Blue Wallet has the advantage of the Lightning Network is baked right into it, as you can make your Bitcoin wallet and your Lightning wallet. And sure, today it's custodial, but there's a lot of non-custodial wallets that have a similar easy experience to Blue Wallet, and Blue Wallet's open source, and I can donate money to them just like guys donated money to me when I was actively doing BidAddress, and try to move that forward because Mycelium's not open source, and like we're not creating assets for the community by using Mycelium or teaching people Mycelium, although it is the de facto Bitcoin wallet as they call themselves. But like in the long run, something like Blue Wallet's going to be better. And there were things like the BRD wallet, Bread, that's open source, but the UX is pretty bad, and they focused on Ethereum and Bitcoin Cash over Lightning.
Yeah, I actually think the Bread wallet UX is amazing. I think it's one of the better like designed
if you try
wallets
to pay
in the
for
space.
things, it's so horrible. You have to do like 2 levels of passwords, and most people, like I don't recommend for a new person with a mobile to put a PIN or a password on it, because their phone has the PIN or the password, and they're hodlers. Like they're not, when you get Bitcoin, you have to go through this 3 to 5 year hodling till every UTXO of yours is in profit, and you're going to forget your PINs and passwords. And those are like heart pumping moments. And when you're teaching other people and they're also feeling like they locked themselves out of their money, and damn, where was that 12 words? I wrote it down,
I guess you're talking more about the use case of like merchants, right? And spending a lot or whatever, using like a day-to-day spending wallet. I like Bread wallet for just its colors and its buttons and its design. But then when they added Bitcoin Cash over SegWit and Lightning Network, and then started their own ICO, and they launched the Bread token, and they added all these other coins, I was like, this is garbage. I'm not gonna, even if it looks beautiful, I'm never gonna recommend anybody use this piece of crap wallet again, even though I still use it. So I still use it because I'm just used to it, right? But like I'm glad to
someone
see
forked it and took out the altcoins. And
did they really?
I think it's called Hold or HODL. Like
really? Okay, I'm gonna have to look at that.
And Bitcoin.org, I think, links to it. But again, it's like if you click on a link on your mobile phone and you're going to pay for something and the wallet just fails on you at that moment, you're a newbie. Like it's not a nice experience, and people don't always know to like click it twice or all those different things.
So like that, it's really hard to square this circle because both of us seem to have some sort of disdain for altcoins, and also recognize that altcoins can provide value to Bitcoin when there's high fee events like this, and we don't have a solution for usage. So,
well, I have disdain for US dollar, but I find that it's useful. So I actually think a mark of successful money is when people use it who hate it. So there's people who use Bitcoin. Like I sold to a guy on the halving day, and I said to him, hey bro, it's halving. He's like, what? What's that? Right? So like, that's like, I need to be more and more aware that like there's so many different users on the network, and it's just like your debit card. No one gives a crap how that works. And a lot of people don't care how Bitcoin works or how the dollar works. It's just like, can they accomplish this thing in their life? And the thing, like people are always like, asking me Bitcoin price predictions or whatever. And I'm like, there's no replacement for Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin allows any 2 people on earth to do business. And if you really look at the world, like step back and look at it, people from India can't do business with people from China, you know, and people from America can't do business with people from Iran, you know. So the dark web and that whole like Ross Ulbricht thing, right? So like there's all these use cases, and like having a safe store of value that's away from the Federal Reserve. So Bitcoin actually, like with gold, if you have soldiers and guns and a Fort Knox, you have an advantage over a guy who has it in a safe, like in his closet. But with Bitcoin, it's kind of like harder to own as an institution, where you have to have a multi-sig, and you have to, the people who have like signing authority have to be somewhat technically literate. Like it might be a world where you cannot be a C-level executive in the future if you don't know how to properly manage a Bitcoin private key, like a whatever,
like a password,
like a password managers. Most people don't know, but like, you know, Casa has that a pretty good service for multi-sig, and you know that's good for organizations. And like I'm not trying to shill anyone, but it's just there's so few options and solutions out there, and like organizations haven't considered that their IT guys that are like way down the hierarchy have like God mode access. And like that's always been like an IT culture joke thing, where like the sysadmin has more power than the president of the organization to some degree, right? Like you're the sysadmin at the central bank, you can add money to anyone's thing, and the C-level people can't necessarily do that, right? So when this becomes Bitcoin, like the biggest threat is internal hacks and stuff like that. So if individuals have an advantage over corporations, like that's a new leveling of the playing field. And I don't think people can, like gold, you know, I love gold, but let's be like hard on it for a minute, because like it's kind of useless, right? So like I had gold in a vault like overseas, and then I was like, the COVID thing happened and airplanes, all the airports shut down. And then I realized, oh, like I'm physically distant from that gold. It needs to be turned back into Bitcoin like right away, because I could turn it into fiat like here, person to person, and that's much more useful. Like I can affect.
Oh, it looks like we lost Peter again. I'm just gonna give him a little quick nudge. Peter, we lost you. So he's saying that he can. I don't know what he's gonna say. I can't fill in the words from his mouth this time, because he's telling me a story about his personal. Okay, you're back.
I'm back. I don't know why my
we'll start...
my hotspot keeps trying to cut out, but
that's all right. So you're saying that you would rather sell the gold in the vault to Bitcoin, because then you can use Bitcoin in locally, like peer to peer.
Locally, yeah. Like at the grocery store, they take it. I was able to.
Do they actually there?
Yes, there's one grocery store that takes it here, and there was a lady who like owns a tattoo shop on the island, and her shop was closed during the lockdown, and she was like making food packages for people because the, I guess, regular food bank was overwhelmed, and I offered to give the regular food bank Bitcoin, but they wouldn't like take it. And this lady, we managed to teach her how to set up a blue wallet, and I was sending her donations like during the lockdown. Like we're actually somewhat out of the lockdown and people are back to work now, but like Bitcoin was actually able to feed people. And you hear all the time on Twitter, like people, Bitcoin maximalists, and they're saying, don't spend Bitcoin, and you know, you can't use Bitcoin here and there. And they're just thinking like you convert it to fiat, but like there's people are using Bitcoin all the time for things that aren't advertised like in mainstream media. Like if you're paying a supplier in Bitcoin, that doesn't like come up as a blog article or whatever, the same way like a retailer taking Bitcoin does.
So you were saying earlier too, because this all kind of ties in together. You were talking about Gresham's law and good money and bad money, and how the altcoins are like bad monies, and you know, you would want to use the altcoins at the marketplace if the fees are too high for small transactions, which for people who aren't early Bitcoiners, I feel like that is, unfortunately for Bitcoin, a true statement, that if you're not and let's be honest, like 99.9% of the population is not a Bitcoiner. So the significant majority of the new people that are going to come into Bitcoin aren't going to have all this baggage and all this knowledge about the fork and all this like knowledge about pre-mines and whether, you know, deep like knowledge and history about like monetary history and follies of crypto and follies of altcoins and ICOs and all this. They're just going to be looking at like, oh, look at these different coins. This one's cheaper. And
yeah, unit bias and all those human failures. And that's where smart money beats like bad
yeah, but
money,
the problem is though
dumb
that
money.
if we are evangelizing or using altcoins the same, because I do separate it and I do think that like it's okay to use Dogecoin or even BCH or ETH or XRP even or whatever. If somebody accepts it and you're just using it as a tool to pay for something and you're not investing in it or promoting it or whatever, then it's a free market, sure, whatever. But what ends up happening is the people that do promote that and use that, they end up promoting it as an investment. Like even Andreas Antonopoulos, he kind of, I got triggered, and you know, he was an influential person on me when I was getting into Bitcoin, and even through the years, I always send people to him, just like I'd always send people to Bread Wallet. And then when he started on the Ethereum thing, I was just like, geez, I don't know if I can be sending people to learn about Bitcoin from him anymore, because even though he's not motivated by, at least it seems like he's not motivated to sell Ethereum coins, you know, and get people to invest in ETH, just the fact that he's promoting Ethereum, people don't separate those two in their heads. Like Ethereum is ETH, ETH is Ethereum. And even though there's
no monetary policy, like there's no inflation schedule that's been defined. And if you go to an ETH conference, you see that nobody there cares about that.
Yeah, because it's a different type of crowd. They attracted a Keynesian sort of like people that are more into well, they're just not into Austrian economics, and they're not libertarians also, pretty much.
It's a lot of job seekers. So like,
yeah, it's JavaScript developers and
like ICOs raise money, then they can hire people. And so you're getting people
young people, they're just young web coders and stuff, right? So they're not like
solidity makes them feel like they should be coding. And like I actually have, like, I'm not super bullish of Ethereum long term, because when you get in, like, there's the struggle of like, you know, VHS beat out Betamax. So like the best technology doesn't always win, but Ethereum like could be the smart contract platform, even though it's not the right architecture. But I still think the right architecture mimics like what the Omni layer is doing and what Factom is doing. So and there's also a guy, I think his name is something, Andrew DeSantis or something, and he has this DOS thing. DOS thing, right? Yeah. So like basically,
but isn't he a BSV guy now?
I don't know. I haven't paid attention to him for the last like year or so, but
me neither.
The whole idea is you just need that immutable hash, and whatever your application is, if something goes wrong, you can ignore that hash in the Bitcoin blockchain, but you're never going to get the Bitcoin blockchain to change. So like the DAO fork thing like is a lot easier to do on Factom, let's say, than it is to do on Ethereum. Because you're just like, listen, okay, we put that hash in, and now we need to just ignore that hash, and like we're gonna fix it by putting this new hash in the chain. Because your like smart contract system doesn't need global consensus. Like contracts need consensus amongst the participants. And then what people forget about contracts is like half the contract has to be money. Like literally, if you and I write a contract as two Canadians and we take it to a lawyer, that lawyer's going to say like, you need to say that like $1 or $2 changed hands. Because if you don't say that, then the judge won't enforce your contract. And so Bitcoin is the only crypto money, like actual money, that you could write a contract in. And you need, like, when the contract succeeds, Bitcoin moves from one person to another, and that's all that matters.
So, you know, I guess like you're defining crypto money versus cryptocurrency. Like altcoins, you're okay with using them to pay with things as currency because based on Gresham's law, like there should be competing currencies, and or not that there should, but just if there is competing currencies, then you will pay for things in the bad money, in the bad currency, the one that won't store value. And money is defined as all of those things that gives currency value plus store value, right? It's like they all have kind of the similar 7 effects or whatever, like divisibility, portability, fungibility, all this stuff. But then money has store value, and over the
If you're
longest,
building a system where people want to get paid, people actually only do actually want to get paid in Bitcoin.
yeah, they
So
do, and
that's
that's
the thing.
what
If you trade it for cash, nobody in the cash market, like maybe it's different in Japan or whatever, nobody wants Bitcoin Cash or knows what it is, or Litecoin,
even the
or even
ICO
Ethereum.
people, even the people creating the altcoins want your Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So that should tell you something. You give them your Bitcoin, and a lot of these
Exactly.
ETH, like a lot of these ETH funds and stuff, you know, I don't know 100%, but I do know some of these guys. They just eventually see the light that Bitcoin is the money, and Bitcoin is the one that's most likely going to win as the global reserve currency. If a cryptocurrency does, it's going to be Bitcoin. So they invest in Bitcoin, and then, you know, they got wrecked really bad on holding ETH from the top to the bottom. A lot of these funds just lost 90% or something.
So like if we steer this into like Bitcoin is so successful that people stop using banks because they're using Lightning Network to like affect payments, and farmers want Bitcoin. They don't want to trade it for government money that's being inflated because they're making a natural resource. Then we get into the fact that you can't get like mortgages from banks. And then that leads into like the tiny house movement. And so like 2 subjects I wanted to kind of discuss with you at some point is like the tiny house movement, and also like using gold as a unit of account. So like I created this site, 2goldgrams, 2gg.org, basically just to have exchange rates between gold grams and Satoshis, because we're getting to the point where Bitcoin as a unit of account, it doesn't matter because it's too big. So like it's going to be Satoshis.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, Satoshis are easy to deal with because like there's people in Venezuela and other countries that are used to prices that are 160,000 Satoshis or bolivars. Who cares? You know, and you don't have to do decimal division. So having the extra zeros is actually easier in people's heads. And I start to feel like Bitcoin is too scarce to ever like really calm down in price volatility for like trying to make a end-to-end business work. So I really think gold grams is, you know, the decimal way of referring to gold. Like troy ounces is the imperial system.
Well,
why wouldn't
you want to do stable coin like Tether or something that's pegged to dollars instead of gold? Because gold pegging to me is kind of silly.
It's not pegging. So a lot of the first feedback I get about Bitcoin is like, wouldn't stable coins be easier? Because like people would rather spend them and merchants would rather take them because then there's no volatility. And then I'm just like,
for commerce.
Right. So for commerce or any type of business, if you do your accounting in gold grams, then that's your stable unit of account. Like you can see what the price is of like coffee beans or various different things, the price of a horse in gold grams, like going back hundreds and hundreds of years or thousands of years.
The problem is though that we're on a fiat system, so you would be so fringe, like your audience that would want to use gold grams to record something or think in gold grams is just smaller than the Bitcoiners at this point. So I think there's more Bitcoiners than gold people at this point.
Well, that might be true, and I don't think in gold grams, and nobody does. And actually, like if you look at the history of like the Roman coinage, like hundreds of years after Rome had left the British Isles, the British people were still doing all their accounting in like the Roman coins, but then paying each other, you know, in grain or whatever they were paying each other in, but not actually in that unit of account. So this is kind of, that argument is against, you know, what I'm trying to promote, because it took 400 years after the money of Rome died for like it to stop being a unit of account. But gold has been a unit of account in the past, and it's a better global unit of account than like special drawing rights, which some international like shipping companies and stuff define things in that, but basically Bitcoin has a unit of account problem. And I've had enough time to think that I don't want to promote the dollar to solve Bitcoin's unit of account problem. I'd rather promote gold. And then
How do you
we
mean
give
though?
so much
What's
power
the
to the
problem?
government. Like USD is like, that's property. Those 3 letters are property of the US government. So if you sell anything in USD, or you raise money in USD equivalent, or you take a US dollar bank transfer, you're now in their court jurisdiction. Like if you've touched the USD, that's the precedent in America. So if you're trying to do like innovative out of the box things and ignore US jurisdiction as best you can, like we're Canadians, why should we bother? Of course, Americans have to bother no matter where they are, but we're already seeing the crypto market split between America and not America. And I'm trying to get down to the purest of the pure vision. Like a lot of Bitcoiners think Bitcoin will be a unit of account. And I'm starting to realize that gold is our friend with respect to unit of account. And like the world is sometimes messy and complicated. And the way I prophesize the future is like after the death of fiat, people will have to price in gold grams because it's stable. And no one will want to take gold grams. So you're going to pay in Bitcoin.
Oh, I see. That actually makes a lot of sense. Like, I'm kind of seeing what you're looking at. Like, if fiat fails, we wouldn't be at a point yet where Bitcoin is $1 million a Bitcoin and it's stable. We're still probably 100,000, 200,000 a Bitcoin. It's only gone up 20x. You know, it's not yet up 100x. So we're $200,000 Bitcoin, and people can't think in fiat anymore because fiat's hyperinflated or whatever, or deflated. So they switch to gold grams because that's already stable and it's been stable for a long time. So you price Bitcoin in gold grams rather than fiat. And it looks like we've lost Peter again. So the interesting thing that he's saying about that is that could happen, but I'll tell him this when he comes back. But I don't think that we're actually going to have fiat fail. I think it's just going to continue to slowly devalue, because every government in the world is using the same fiat system, and they've got every incentive in the world to keep that going. So I don't think that we're going to see a switch to an asset or a commodity-backed system anymore, unless like an apocalyptic event happen. Because even in Venezuela, they still have a hyperinflationary currency, but it's still a fiat currency. And every other place that has had hyperinflationary events, they still end up with fiat currencies. So I don't think we're going to see, as much as the gold people and Bitcoiners would love to see fiat go away and gold or Bitcoin become a unit of account or the basis of the currency. I don't think we're going to ever see that in our lifetime. I think they're just going to keep the Ponzi going and maybe switch to a new fiat. Like it'll be version 2, USD 2. But it's an interesting play that Peter's got going there. I'll give him a couple more minutes to come back. Otherwise, oh, there he is. Peter's back.
Hey, I'm back. Sorry about that again.
That's okay. I was just saying, so I'll quickly sum up. I don't think that we're ever going to see that happen. I like the philosophical exercise and the thought exercise, but there's no reason I don't think that we will ever see a commodity-based money again used by governments. Like I think we're just going to continue on this path, and money will continue to lose value, and currencies will continue to devalue against each other, like fiat currencies. And like the central bankers will not switch to bank or a Bitcoin or gold backed money. They'll just continue with fiat. They'll just have to. So I don't think that we will actually see hyperinflation.
And Venezuela's doing that. So Venezuela's doing that. So basically their government is basically a corporation that turns oil into Bitcoin. and the bolivar is just something in between to like grease up the corruption.
Yeah,
And
but
then things have only
but they're not
started to
backing.
stabilize
They
like
don't back the
commercially because
currency.
they changed the law where you can price things in US dollars now.
Yeah, but they don't back it by a commodity, right? Like,
Yeah,
even
they're
though the
not backing
government's
it in
getting
crypto.
Bitcoin.
No.
Yeah. So, but it's an interesting project.
Okay, so like
Experiment.
wait, hold on. So wait. So once there's hyperinflation, like why would any bank give you a mortgage for your house, right?
But why do you think
So
we will
like I'm
see
trying to think
hyperinflation?
like what happens if
I think we've got a delay.
that we'll see hyperinflation? Yeah. Well, Venezuela turned out that way, and America now is printing money while the economy is not working. So there's a slow leak of fiat into the Bitcoin world. So Bitcoin is like eating traditional finance.
Right.
And it's just boomers that believe in the pension myth. Like the whole pension, Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. That it's not prepaid. They're getting young people to pay for old people. And like if there's hyperinflation, then if the bank gives you a loan, when you pay it back, it's less than what they gave you. So why would they want to give you like a home mortgage, right? It's like giving you a house for free. So like one thing I realize in like how deep of a Bitcoiner are you is like, how willing are you to give up your bank mortgage? Because I think most people are not willing at all to like downsize and live in something reasonable. Like in the 70s, it was maybe 5 years to save up for a down payment. And now it's like 20 years to save up for the down payment. And, you know, 25, 30-year mortgages, no one has jobs for 25 or 30 years. So it's completely unrealistic. And I know like in Canada, it's a 5-year term on a 25-year mortgage, but like in Curacao, it's a 30-year mortgage with a 30-year term, you know? And the world has like, is changing a lot in that respect. And I'm just trying to say like, what if you can't get a bank mortgage, or are you willing to give up on your mortgage? Because if you're truly a Bitcoiner, the mortgage is like empowering your bank. And that leads into the tiny house movement, because like the super majority of people like only have enough money to live in smaller square footage. Like in the 50s, people lived in 1,200 square feet. And the tiny house movement, I would roughly define it as a house that you live in without debt that's like 200 to 600 square feet. You know, if you can live in a bigger house with no debt, go ahead and do it, right?
I could never do a tiny house.
And that's what everyone says to me, right? So it's it makes me feel crazy to like even suggest it, but it's just like at a certain point, like a lot of the tiny houses, the bad stigma is like if it's on mobiles, like on a trailer, like on wheels, then you're only 8.5 feet wide. But if it's a foundation build, it's like you're living in a cottage.
My brother wants a tiny house. That's like his dream, is to live in a tiny house. My sister too. She'd be fine living in a tiny house. I need my sauna room. I need my exercise room. I need my Amazon box room. I need my laundry room. I need my yoga room. I need all the rooms, man.
Well, you might need 2 or 3 trailers like
exactly.
of tiny houses and living outdoors but it's just like farming. So like a lot of farming technology has been solved. Like you can farm in a dry climate like Curacao where there's not that much rain, or in a snowy climate like Canada. But we get told like, oh, that's ridiculous. It's snowy. Like nothing will grow here, but you just do a farmhouse, a greenhouse or whatever.
Right.
So like all that technology is there. It's on YouTube. It's on the internet.
My neighbor here in Ontario has palm trees in his backyard. I was going for a walk the other day and I saw there was a person in my neighborhood with a palm tree. I've never seen a palm tree in Canada in my life. Maybe at like a museum or a mall or something like that. But yeah, one of my neighbors here has a palm tree, some sort of tropical leaf tree in his backyard. I'm like, what the hell? Does that thing stay alive in the winter?
Level,
Maybe it's some kind of
doing that.
It could be like a genetically modified like tropical plant or something that somehow is able to survive the winter or thrive in the winter, because it's definitely gets like negative 30 degrees here sometimes.
Right. So like if you watch like Doomsday Preppers, like say on Netflix or whatever, you know, it's an American show, and like 95% of them realize they need guns because they need to protect their stuff. And that comes down to everyone's dependent on the grocery store. And what if the grocery store doesn't have groceries, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So we're living in a world where, like, it's not just this problem of running a full node is the same problem as running a greenhouse, is the same problem as investing in solar panels. Like, we need to decentralize our lives. Like,
Yeah.
of course, specializing is important, but we've like hyper and over specialized where like per household, we don't have any resilience. So like we're not optimizing at all for resilience. And if all of my neighbors have mortgages and there's an economic collapse and they all sell at the same time, then my house without a mortgage is still worth zero.
So have you ever read the book or heard about the book, The Price of Tomorrow?
No, I haven't.
I'll send you a link to it afterwards, but Real Vision did an interview with Jeff Booth, the author of this book, and he presents a really good argument that I'd never thought about before. And he thinks that technology is deflationary, and as we continue to go forward with these advancements in technology, it should bring the cost of everything lower. And the Federal Reserve and the central bankers are trying to have an inflationary target, and they're trying to inflate the currency at like a minimum target of 1 to 2% a year, and they're fighting technology. So there's a natural deflationary trend from all these advancements in technology that we have that could make everything else cheap and make labor not as needed, you know? So his basic presentation is that, like, if the Fed wasn't trying to inflate things, prices of things would come down and we would get more things. So we would get more stuff, our houses would come down, everything would come down because of technology, and then we wouldn't be needing to solve this job crisis because everything's coming down in price. So people will be on smaller incomes.
Everyone with an economics degree is like anti-deflation, right? And deflation is bad in a gold world because, like, if one atom of gold is like a chocolate bar, how do you hold the atom of gold in your hand and buy the chocolate bar, right? But like Bitcoin is like divisible, even in theory, beyond one Satoshi, right? So, and obviously for regular people, deflation is good. You have money or currency and it goes up in purchasing power. But then the central banking game is over because no one will want to get into debt. And they're monetizing everyone's like productive efforts. Like, they can print money when people are productive because they're skimming that 1 to 2% off the top. But now they're printing money with the economy shut down. That's a totally different game. That means the velocity of their printing is like way higher. You know?
Yeah, and the GDP now, it's like it used to be within reason, the GDP versus the new money that they made and the quantitative easing and all that stuff. It was obscene before, but now it's getting to like Japan levels, where Japan is like more than 100% of their GDP now is
right
bank stimulation or central bank manipulation, printing of currency. So the US is obviously the arguably the first largest economy in the world, but some say now China's economy is bigger than the US. But, you know, there's never been an experiment like this scale before, where the biggest economy in the world is toying with negative interest rates and printing money that the GDP can't support it. But still, even with all that, I don't think we're going to see hyperinflation, because I don't think they're as bad as the central bankers in Venezuela or any of these other countries that have experienced this, like Zimbabwe and stuff. I think and the US dollar is the reserve currency, so everybody wants it, everybody needs it. So I think we're just going to see inflation, or maybe even stagflation, where stagflation is prices rise, but the economy's stagnant, right? So people can't, you know, they're not getting paid more, but the prices are going. Is that the definition of stagflation, or stagflation prices decline?
I think it was the first thing you said. But
inflation rate is high, economic rate slows. Yeah, so stagflation could happen, or just regular inflation could happen. But then people like Real Vision, like Raoul Paul and Max Kaiser from the Kaiser Report, they're always talking about like a deflationary spiral where the central banks try to shrink the currency supply because they realize it's insane, it's unsustainable. So they try to shrink the currency supply, and then that sets off a deflationary spiral. So I mean, it's like,
I think that I know
what's going to happen here.
Short-term deflationary spiral. Like you can't really buy or sell real estate while you can't like leave your house, and the stock market multiples are way up. So people who have cash don't necessarily want to put it back into the stock market, and like maybe it'll turn out like you're saying. It's none of my predictions are going to come true and all that type of thing. But like 40 million Americans lost their job, right? There was 168 million Americans with jobs, but like 100% of the government employees kept their jobs, right? So like the absurd nature of the government, and like what's different, like what's fundamentally different between the way China runs their government, North Korea, United States, Canada, Sweden, UK, France. Like there's so much similarities. Like there's a treasury and a central bank in every country, and someone at a whim prints money. And basically since we don't have a savings culture, then the Federal Reserve, like Mnuchin and Trump, are going to hand out $500 billion in loans to only S&P 500 companies. So it's like you get in the S&P 500 and now you're whitelisted, and they're going to give you loans to keep your company going. So they're picking winners and losers. So the reason we've had a hard time competing with Huawei is it's like similar. I don't know if you remember the softwood lumber dispute between Canada and America, but basically America said Canada is letting private people like cut trees without buying the crown land under it. So like, you don't have to buy the land, you chop the trees and just buy the trees from us, but not the land. But in America, you can't just buy trees and not land. So it's an unfair competitive advantage. So Huawei handing out money, like the Chinese central bank handing out money to Huawei makes it hard for like Samsung in Korea to compete and Apple in the States to compete. So now the Federal Reserve just has to like give unlimited loans to Apple to compete with Huawei.
That's interesting.
And so, yeah, they're picking winners and losers. And the thing is, people think like, how is this COVID overreaction like so well coordinated throughout the world? And it's basically it's an incentive game. So like if you shut down the economy, then you create new money that's in a slush fund, and you get to decide who you give it to. And when you decide who you give it to is when you get kickbacks. And that's the nature of politics. And that's the institutional capture problem. And it's just like, that's why altcoins suck, because you can just bribe the central developer to like ruin it.
So yeah, back to altcoins.
Yeah, looped it all the way back.
Yeah, but like obviously for all of these reasons, for what we've been talking about with money and currency and central banks and all that, when it comes to the investment thesis and the investment use case, Bitcoin is the one. Bitcoin is king.
The only one, yeah.
But
I try to say to people, if you have nothing, just get Bitcoin. And how do you know what anything's going to be worth in 5 or 10 years besides Bitcoin?
But if we both can kind of like see the valid use case of having altcoins with low fees to use for small transactions, but also be cognizant that the Lightning Network custodial solutions are just as secure as these not secure altcoins, maybe it's not so bad to promote custodial Lightning wallets until everything is more advanced and ready. I used to not like, I don't like promoting non-custodial, but I also have a bit of like confusion in my head about, well, I do think that the fees are too high for people to like, average people to want to use it. If they have to pay $5 for a fee, I don't think that's right for average everyday transactions for usage. And I don't want to be one of those people that are just like, you can only use Bitcoin by hodling, like don't spend your Bitcoin ever. Bitcoin is not money. Like, I don't want to be one of those people. I think it's valid to use it as both. I always think I think it's smarter for you to hold your Bitcoin for sure. But if you want to use Bitcoin, go ahead. If you want to use cryptocurrency, that's awesome. So maybe I'll have to start
I don't
being
think
okay with
custodial versus
custodial.
non-custodial is actually the current problem with Lightning. I think it's like the person you make the channel with, like let's call them a merchant, they're being like sloppy with managing liquidity. So like so the reality is everyone is starting with some Bitcoin. So it's like you either had fiat and you got Bitcoin, but you know, like we were having this debate in that chat with Roger the other day, and you know, I conceded like, hey, Bitcoin Cash is easier than the Lightning Network. But like if we walk it through, no one starts with Bitcoin Cash, right? Like you start with fiat, and unless you go to bitcoin.com and you've misunderstood things, like you wind up with Bitcoin, right?
Right.
So if you want to use Lightning or Bitcoin Cash, it requires a Bitcoin transaction because you're either doing a shapeshift or you're doing a Bitcoin transaction to open a Lightning channel. And you know, I have multiple Lightning wallets with channels open. So if I see Lightning's available at an online retailer, like I'm picking Lightning first. And maybe it is the UX right now where I have to try a few of the wallets. And you know, like some payment processors don't take Lightning, you know, which I think is weird. Some of them take it, and I don't want to name anyone, you know, but like some of them are supporting, let's say 50 altcoins, and one of them is the Lightning Network, right? So if you're supporting 50 chains, you're not putting a lot of effort into having like a Lightning Network liquidity facility properly. So like then, you know, I'll send an email to support and I'll be like, oh, my payment failed and it gave me this error, like there was no inbound liquidity on your end as the merchant. And then their answer is like, did you open a channel directly to us? And I'm like, well, no, I didn't. Like I had in the past, or maybe I will in the future, but at this moment I didn't do that. And it's kind of upon them to make the hub and spoke thing work. And I don't see anything wrong with hub and spoke, because once you get in non-custodial Lightning, you're controlling all the keys. And this idea that you need a full node, you don't. Like you need a light client, and you don't even need watchtowers and a lot of that extra stuff that distracts from it. Because if someone stole from you on the Lightning Network, that's a confirmed transaction for 2 whole weeks before they're able to move it. So my Lightning mobile wallet can always check in the background, or I'm opening it more than once every 2 weeks. And like in this hodl stage where people are hodling, maybe they don't have their Lightning wallet open all the time. But in a world where like everyone has Lightning, like 60 or 70% of people, like with WhatsApp, like that many people have Lightning Network, then you're not running into these problems.
So how long do you think it'll be before we get there?
I think it's a slow and steady turtle wins the race thing, because this isn't just WhatsApp or Telegram. Like you're changing the nature of money, and people have to get comfortable with it. And like there's arguments all the time by people, guys like us who know too much, of like what's the best way to teach the grandmas. Like I had a whole debate with people in that same chat we were referring to about like teaching people about password managers versus just writing the 12 words down. So my personal experience of talking to newbies is no one uses a password manager except for like really tech savvy people, okay? So remembering a password is much harder than writing 12 words down. And then I always tell the people, you put it where your jewelry is or your like tax documents, something you won't lose. And people don't lose their jewelry.
Right. Yeah, I always tell people to treat their Bitcoin seed phrase like a piece of gold or a stack of cash, and don't just leave it out, and don't take a picture of it because, you know, for obvious reasons. So yeah, if you kind of get people to treat their
I'm back.
Yeah, if you get people to treat their Bitcoin seed phrase like gold or cash or something that's a bearer instrument then that they don't want to lose, that's obviously the best.
And I find that easier to teach than like a random password that has to be in a password manager.
Let's go into this like with a live example. This person's watching on Twitch, and they said, "Is there any reason to have a Bitcoin?" I don't see reasons to buy it. I mean, to use it. So am I missing something? And then I said, "Well, what do you want to use Bitcoin for?" Yeah. I said, "What do you want to use it for?" He said, "Actually, I didn't think to use it at all. I was just wondering, is there any reason to have Bitcoin?" So this is where we are in the state of things. The average person out there still just doesn't even know what the heck Bitcoin is and why they want it.
Yeah.
We're so early.
Yeah. It's like we're super early, and I try to just say to people, don't worry about it. Like eventually, like you'll be forced to buy Bitcoin. Like something will happen that will like force you to become a Bitcoiner. So like I ran into a guy I used to work with, and he said, oh, he was trying to buy something online. I don't know if it was VPN access or what have you. And he just said his credit card didn't work. So if you ever try to do a credit card transaction where you're not buying from a merchant in your own country, those things like fail all the time, so like Bitcoin solves that.
I always say too, like for people in that situation where they're just not early adopters of technology, or they're not investors or whatever, I just say like it's like probably going to happen that eventually you will be using Bitcoin, and you just may not even be knowing that you're using Bitcoin. And that's the same as using Facebook in 2009. If you had a Facebook account in 2009, you were probably the only one in your friend circle that had a Facebook account, and it was this cool new tech you were using. But then fast forward 5 years, everybody's using Facebook. Businesses are advertising their Facebook page and all this stuff. And by that time, the share price of Bitcoin or of Facebook had gone insane. So by the time everyone's using the technology, it's too late to benefit from the financial gain of that.
Yeah, most of the wealth
whatever
transfer will have happened by then.
So now Bitcoin could potentially go to $1 million per BTC in the next 10 years. If that's $20 trillion or so, that's 2 times the size of the gold market cap right now. It's half the size of, or even a third the size of like fiat money.
What happens to fiat if people don't want it when they sell their houses, right?
If people don't want fiat, if it becomes valueless, like if it keeps going down in value.
That's the whole thing is Bitcoin. When we talk about the $1 million thing, like, that's why the gold grams. You know what I mean? Because
it'll become hard to think.
Is the ratio. Like, how many gold grams do you get for 1 Bitcoin now, and like how many will you get when $1 million is a Bitcoin? Like, how much will the dollar have hyperinflated? How much? Like, there's so much permission. So, I know there is this challenge where we're not yet, because Lightning isn't fully deployed, like kind of like banking the unbanked. So like poor people need bad money, but like we're like maybe 1% of the world is Bitcoiners, let's say, or 0.1%. And 15% of the people is like the upper class, like the merchant class, the saving class, like people who can save. It's just the top 15% in every country. And like, I'm convinced that all of those people will want Bitcoin.
Yes, for sure. I think that as time goes on, and even now when you start to see billionaire world-class investors and all this stuff start to realize that they're not gold bugs, they're not like libertarians, they're just looking strictly at this from a portfolio diversification viewpoint. They're not like politically motivated. They're just like, fiat is losing its value. I'm going to protect my portfolio. I need to get off zero and get some Bitcoin. So Paul Tudor Jones and all these guys come into Bitcoin because it's just the sensible thing to do.
Well, anyone who's tried to move $5,000 like out of an ATM or wire it internationally, like it's very hard to move more than $5,000. You have to have a PDF that explains it. And you have to have a good permission reason that the bank wants to hear.
Good permission slip.
Yeah, and there's a clip on CNBC of the Shark Tank Kevin O'Leary guy saying that, I mean, guy's like a billionaire or a half billionaire, and he can't move $1 million out of Canada to some other remote country to do an investment. Like his bankers are just like, nope, sorry. Central bank, nope, sorry. To move $1 million in Bitcoin, like once you have the Bitcoin, like that's easy peasy.
Yeah.
So there's going to be more investments that happen with Bitcoin internationally, affecting payments, setting up offshore corporations paying in Bitcoin, getting a Vanuatu citizenship in Bitcoin, buying real estate in Aruba in Bitcoin, right? Because like once you can't, like fiat's not even an option, maybe you can get something on half price or a quarter price because people already have an upside expectation with Bitcoin. So like they'd rather just take the Bitcoin and hodl it. Not if they have a 90% mortgage and they're immediately moving back into another house. Like they're renters from the bank.
Yeah. So that perfectly gives this guy his answer. He said, or maybe it's a girl. No, it's a guy with an upside down headphones on. I mean, I see a lot of people invest in Bitcoin instead of stocks or bonds, and usually they see it as magic stuff that make them rich. But stocks and bonds has their reports and info that allows you to explain to see if there's a reason to have it. So exactly, he just explained your reason. When you need to move $1 million to buy a house in Barbados, then you use Bitcoin. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, well, no, but
average people, that's not the average person.
Most average people on earth can't buy stocks and bonds. So actually the way savings works is it's cash, then a car, then a house. And when you're in that middle stage of you've saved enough for a car, you're in the trap because cars depreciate. So you keep screwing yourself over and spending your last nickel on that car. But you need that car to get that job and to have that bigger economic freedom. And gold is just not that stopgap because gold doesn't really have an upside and the spread is like huge. So you're going to pay like 5% to buy it, 5% to sell it, and it's not that liquid. Like Bitcoin today is way more liquid on the street than gold. And in order to save like $100 a month in something that's not a car and not fiat, Bitcoin is actually a niche and the only option.
So again, to show you where we are with the state of Bitcoin adoption, this guy's asking, is it safe to use Bitcoin?
Yes,
and that's
it's safe.
that's the one thing that I get a little bit now, and it's a very valid question. It's very like people have that question, like, is this magic internet money thing safe or is it just some scam or whatever? I was buying some freeze-dried meat back in January when the COVID thing was raging around in China. I was like, this is going to disrupt supply chains and wreck the economy. I got to get myself some food just in case. So, and I got this guy, he's like from this prepper website, I guess, that sells freeze-dried food that lasts for 25 years. And I was trying to convince the guy to take Bitcoin.
Perfect guy. He should
I thought so. But he was like, he was hung up on that thing. It's not safe. He's like, I don't know who's controlling this, and doesn't matter how many times you tell me this is decentralized. I'm not a computer guy. I can't understand that this is safe, so I'm just never going to use it. I'd rather use gold. And I'm like, well, you know what, I guess I can't really argue with you there. I sent him some Bitcoin anyway, and he forgot about it and like didn't even, I sent him like $5 or something through text message, and
those people will all be Bitcoiners eventually because they're just waiting for the social signals. Like it's just like how everyone like the hashtag stay the fuck at home. Like, how about like let's commit to freedom? You know what I mean? So it's just like people.
I was one of those hashtag users, I have to admit, at the beginning.
So that's because we don't appreciate how much our minds like are influenced by like the mass thinking. So like whatever is the headline, whatever other people are thinking, whatever thoughts are going around, like the zeitgeist, we're more influenced by that than we think. And like, that's why when it comes to like Bitcoin and gold grams as a unit of account, and sometimes it's like Milton Friedman said with respect to the Chicago Boys shock doctrine thing, is like, you just have to leave those ideas like lying around. So like Bitcoin is now the biggest idea that's been lying around now that the printer is going burr and like people are understanding it. And like the reason fees are so high, it's retail usage. It's not some crazy like spammer doing like $4 a transaction per block, $4,000 or $5,000 burning fiat money, which by the way, the Fed could do. But it's just like, there's an insane amount of retail demand. And I just know it because it's like when you're an OG, people like ask you your opinions, message you, call you. And so you can just like put your finger on the pulse and feel like, okay, this time people are buying the dip, level-headed for the long term, thinking about their retirement, and like they're not asking about shit coins.
Exactly. Yeah, that I do get a little bit of that now though. Like I get someone will text me that's like, hey, what do you think about LTC, or what do you think about ETH? And like, I get a little bit of that, but more so it's people kind of this time around that are just wanting Bitcoin. And thankfully we don't have this ICO mania, and I really don't think we're going to have the ICO craze happen ever again, like to the extent that it did in 2017. And there will not be like all the altcoins are not going to go away because that's come out of this too. A lot of Bitcoin maximalists used to think that once the purge happened, it would just get rid of all the altcoins, just like it did in the previous cycles.
They never die because one guy can keep each coin alive, and there's like one committed whale behind each coin. That's something people don't realize either.
Yeah, there's always an incentive there to keep that coin appearing like it's in the top 10. A lot of this market cap stuff is phantom value and fake transactions on the exchanges. And when you look at the actual like dollar value of the currency that's being transacted on the blockchain, Bitcoin is by magnitudes more meaningful than any of the other cryptocurrencies. And most of the other cryptocurrencies are just like FOMO juice.
Yes, totally. And that's natural. Like I still have a handful of altcoins because there's going to be uneducated people coming into the market in waves, like the last few waves, and they'll want to know like what's cheaper with the unit bias, the next shiny thing. I can't explain to people why when Ripple's $3, it won't go to $5. And I just go, Ripple Corp has 60% of the coins. Like, you want to invest in that? Okay, but I don't want to have a conversation about it. Like, that's just not interesting to me. Like, Ripple is so uninteresting. Like, I can't even with loved ones, like, convince them. I'm just like, bro, do your own thing. Like, there's nothing I could say, like,
Yeah, getting wrecked is a good teacher, like when people get wrecked on it. But the problem is when we let people get wrecked, then they kind of give up on everything and they start to lump Bitcoin in with altcoins. And that's
they
the
come
thing.
Back. So we're starting to see the Mt. Gox, the people who got wrecked from Mt. Gox come back, and people will come back. It takes 5 or more years. Egos are hard things to
Egos are hard things to cook. Egos are hard things to challenge. Egos are hard things to Dave Chappelle. Change. Egos are hard things to change. That's what Peter said before his internet kicked out. So this person said, I mean, not is it safe? Is that the point to have it because it's safe? I would say yes. So Bitcoin, the reason to have Bitcoin is because it's a safer store of value over long periods of time than fiat money is, because fiat money just gets printed into oblivion. And if you look over long periods of time, fiat money has lost significant amounts of money. Chart,
like everyone.
Oh wait, we got remnants of. Hold on, I'm gonna remove them. So you come back. If you look over long periods of time, fiat money's lost like 96% of its value of purchasing power in the last 100 years, the US dollar. We are still live, but we're just about to end it. I'm going to wait for Peter to come back. Is he here? He's not here. So yeah, one of the good reasons that you would want Bitcoin is because it holds value over long periods of time, and it's a scarce asset. So other assets are not as scarce as Bitcoin. Gold is scarce like Bitcoin. But yeah, Peter's back. I think we should probably wrap it up here, Peter, because you keep losing connection. We've already done quite a bit of time. We got some good stuff here. We don't want to go. We don't want you to go over your
great conversation. It's a bit embarrassing how bad my internet. Yeah. Why did you end up moving? Curacao is a much better connected island than this. I love the warm weather. I'm not a winter guy, so it's purely I was seeking out a warm weather place, and I found the Dutch Caribbean, which has nicer infrastructure than the British Caribbean, from what I had experienced.
What were you doing before Bitcoin?
And we're outside of the hurricane belt here. Before Bitcoin, I was a team lead at a sportsbook. Software developer. Like, I've been a software developer all my life, and I was working at a local sportsbook as a team lead, and eventually I was manager there. And then, one day the price went nuts, and I was able to politely resign.
Nice. And that's how you found about a
Yeah.
Bitcoin? You were retired and you were just looking at Slashdot and you saw this magic internet thing and
No, I'm saying like I worked my job for like 6, 7 years after I found out about Bitcoin.
oh, I gotcha.
So I found out about Bitcoin and it was just the sweetest hobby. And like my day job was, you know, building a JavaScript based interface, which had, you know, all the world's sporting events jammed on one page. So like you're putting all that data into one browser page, which is more than what the browser can technically handle, you know, that was like a huge sharpening of my sword when it came to becoming an expert. And I was schooling myself so hardcore for the job, you know? And then when I found out about Bitcoin, I'm just like, why doesn't someone just make it so you can just put this on paper and then people can audit the code? I'll write it in really clear, understandable JavaScript. And like, I did bid address in a way that even the guys with cool sites now, like they don't do it that way. They're like bundling their JavaScript and minifying it. And no one else who can like read and write JavaScript can actually audit their code. But like what people would say about my code is, damn, that thing, like it's so well written that other people can read it and see like that I had such a pure intention. And, you know, like I can say it's been a super successful project because Bitcoin has been about technology to me, but like I knew that this was a financial opportunity as well. And like BidAddress has helped people hodl literally from $10 to 10,000. And people still don't get when it comes to like long-term storage, how simple solutions are more effective and long lasting. Like mnemonics, if you die and you give a mnemonic to your loved one, you don't know which friggin' wallet that thing's going to work in. But like a raw private key, like that's going to work everywhere and even in 20 or 30 years from now.
Well, hopefully based on like BIP standards, that all the mnemonics will kind of, you know, it won't be hard to figure out because the wallets will use the standards and then you'll be able to put your seed phrase in.
Yeah.
But yeah, private keys.
Hopefully eventually.
Sure.
I tried to bring that up at the roundtable a couple years ago.
A couple years ago.
But it's a couple years ago. But it's still a challenge because just, you know, every vendor's locked into their thing right now. And to go to a standard makes their users have a headache. But I actually seen Ledger has done that. If you notice with Ledger Live, they're now making the Ethereum path match what Trezor does in the rest of the community. But maybe in the long term, whatever happens with altcoins won't matter that much.
Well, this guy said he thinks he sounds like he likes Bitcoin, but he thinks it requires a bunch of investing experience, the ability to analyze fundamental factors. And you know, I think
look, if you look at the charts, you can never find 2 days that are 3 years apart exactly where the 3-year older price is like worse than the 3-year later price.
I don't even think it's that,
and hold for 3 years.
I think, look, I just think it's just she's just coming in on a conversation where we're talking about all these economic things and all that. What's a good way? What do you think is a good way for a new person to just kind of get the Bitcoin experience? Where do you usually send people to like watch videos and stuff?
Oh, I say like, I'll sell you a little bit, install this blue wallet. Here's the link. Works for iOS, works for Android, and buy some. And like depending where you have a bank account or if you have cash, like these are the easiest options. And so like, I know what the easiest option is for people I talk to, which are either in Netherlands, Curacao, Canada, or US.
Okay, this guy's from Belarus. So what's the best option for this person to go?
Well, that's like challenging my European knowledge. I don't think Belarus is in the European Economic Zone. If it is in the SEPA region, then that's like the easiest region to buy Bitcoins with a bank transfer, because SEPA transactions go through almost 30 countries or whatever easily.
Looks like there was a presidential decree in Belarus in 2018 that legalized Bitcoin transactions and mining and buying and selling and all that stuff. So that's good.
ATMs are easy. If they're
wasn't Belarus the country where they actually seized like billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin from this drug cartel, and now the central bank of Belarus actually is like one of the largest Bitcoin holders.
I heard that headline. I don't know if we have to fact check it or not. Like, it might be hype.
Didn't the government didn't the Belarusian president actually say that they're going to mine Bitcoin with the energy, like the state energy? Once it's not efficient to sell, they're going to use it to mine Bitcoin.
I don't know about that. I didn't hear, but I did hear what you were saying about apparently they had seized a whole lot of Bitcoin, like criminal seizure or something like that, and that they would have some in Belarus.
Yeah, Belarus is really, really good, really positive towards Bitcoin, which is good to see things like that, like state actors starting to take positive stances,
well,
like not positive, but like saying we want more Bitcoin. We're going to mine Bitcoin. The more you see that,
JP Morgan just is now banking Coinbase and Gemini. So like the banking battle to some extent is won in America, right? Like the biggest dog, JP Morgan, has now like whitelisted the two big exchanges. So like, I don't think Wall Street and the Fed and all that are going to try to tear down Bitcoin.
Right. Yeah, it's much less riskier now than it was maybe 3 years ago when the ICO boom was happening and the SEC was weighing in. And
it's like gold. Like gold is a threat to fiat. So like they got to get in the game. They got to make corporations. They got to short the Bitcoin price, keep it suppressed as long as they can. Like those things slow down adoption. And that's why it's going to be like a long struggle.
Yeah. And that's why we're still early.
We're definitely early. And everyone who comes into Bitcoin thinks they're too late, including me and you. I'm sure you had that feeling. And everyone on the forums, like back in the day, was saying that. New people on Reddit are saying that all the time. Yeah, and it's always a good time to buy Bitcoin.
Yeah, so that's the basic like thing. Strategy for or the best. What's your best advice to a noob in terms of buying and holding Bitcoin, like investment wise?
Dollar cost averaging. Hold it for 3 years minimum.
So buy, like, do you give a percentage or just like how do you tell them like what to buy,
whatever
how much
they're comfortable with? You know what I mean? Like if you don't have between 1% and 5% of your net worth in Bitcoin, like you're making a big mistake, you know? So I think everyone should have 3 months of emergency money in fiat. And then let's say, because we're two Bitcoiners here talking, the rest of your money should be in Bitcoin that's not in your house, you know? So you got your house, you got your car, you got your 3 months of emergency fiat, and every other excess amount of fiat that you have goes into Bitcoin, not into some stock or bond or like pension scam.
Nice. So you just went between 1% to 3% to 100%.
Yeah. Well, so like sometimes 3 months emergency money is like 100% of people's net worth.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're a crypto investor, it's like just put it all in Bitcoin, you know. But even me as an investor, like my portfolio is much more spread out now. I have much more diversification because I was expecting a bunch of crazy shit to happen because of COVID, and I still think over the next year it's just going to happen. It's just going to take longer. Yeah. But I think there's going to be major discounts in real estate and stocks and stuff like that. So I want to be able to have cash to buy the dip. So I sold Bitcoin before the halving so that I could have cash to buy dips in real estate locally, invest in businesses, local businesses, online businesses, start a business, buy stocks, life insurance.
Yeah, the one thing Warren Buffett gets right is like Bitcoin is like gold. It's non-productive. So like you do want to have some of your wealth in something that's productive, like a business that makes profit because it produces, or real estate because you got renters. Right. That all makes sense, of course. Yeah.
So I still have the majority of my net worth is still exposed to Bitcoin, but I do have a lot now exposed to real estate. I mean, not a lot of dollars, but like a percentage wise, like I have a percentage wise exposed to real estate, cash, because I'm waiting to buy that dip. That's that's not happening in the stock market, and even in Bitcoin too. But you know, I'm fine.
There's going to be some type of wreckage in the stock market, like whenever the quarter two, like after June, in July when they have to give all the numbers and be public with it, you know, it's going to be carnage.
Well, I was never a stock investor. I was never like a finance guy or anything like that. So I never was attracted to any of that stuff. It was only Bitcoin and my like disdain with central banking and like shock that a private corporation prints our money and all that stuff that made me like realize Bitcoin was like a political stance.
Yeah,
it was like voting.
Is. Yeah, it is.
It's like I'd rather vote by buying Bitcoin than vote in an election. I don't think voting in an election is really going to change anything.
Dude, that brings up a topic for me, which is kind of like parallel governments and DAOs. And like, I think, you know, what we've seen of DAOs right now is kind of like a joke. But Bitcoin, like if you look at most terms and conditions of commercial bank accounts, they say that they won't bank a political organization. So of course, all the political parties that, you know, the Liberal Party of Canada, Republican Party in the States, they all have bank accounts. So like they've been grandfathered in. But if you're starting a new political movement, most of the banks are banning you from getting an account. So if you want to actually have a parallel government, let's say you want to put asphalt in to fill potholes because the local government isn't doing it and roads are public, so you have the right to voluntarily fix the tragedy of the commons, you know, you can only make a treasury with Bitcoin, or let's argue Ethereum, but you need some type of cryptocurrency or money to pool it into a treasury in order to make political action. So fixing the road, making an alternative hospital, cleaning up garbage, those are all political movements. And like to do any of those organized today requires more than WhatsApp and Twitter. It requires Bitcoin.
Oh, that's interesting. Never thought about it like that.
There's been a couple guys here that started a nonprofit DAO they call CuraDAO, and you can send them like donations in Ethereum, and then there's projects that they vote on and allocate money to, and then like execute those projects. And they don't pretend like it's a perfect system, but it's an experiment that they're working on that I think is interesting. And you know, I'm not involved in it. I just donated a little scraps to them, but like out of nowhere, they thought of this idea and they're doing it. And that really has been thought-provoking for me. And I think that's what I believe in order to affect change.
Yeah. But you triggered me with Ethereum, though. That's the problem.
Yeah. No, I know. It's like they all want to play on Ethereum right now, but in the future, they'll understand that the DAO and the voting and everything, that can all be separate. And then like it affects a Bitcoin payment. So like you put your votes in Ethereum, but your money is in Bitcoin like that.
So this person says that's been talking to us the whole time through Twitch. Yes, it makes perfect sense. There is a stock guy and then money, which is like dollars, euros, and Bitcoin. And this is completely different directions. Yeah, I guess it is confusing for people to think about Bitcoin as different than a stock, because even still, some of the people I talk to are like, how do I get some Bitcoin shares?
Well, why isn't there a regulation on the stock market where the multiple is like 3 times earnings? So like every stock, whatever the end profit is, then it's worth 3 years of that. Because like Amazon, that's a great company, everything, but do I want to pay like 200 times earnings? Because like I'm not going to live 200 years.
Yeah, right? Exactly. It's ridiculous.
So what's the point in having regulated stocks and stuff like that if there isn't like price regulation and the multiples become speculation?
Got to keep the Ponzi going.
Exactly.
All right. Well, Peter, I think that's a good way to wrap up. We got some good advice for noobs at the end there. Basically, get 3 months of expenses under your belt, especially for the year that's upcoming with COVID. You never know what's going to happen there. There could be second wave and a lockdown again. And like, they're not going to be able to just keep printing money forever to keep us to stay home and everything. So try to shore up your finances, get 3 months of expenses. Try to build in some resiliency, like with either lowering your expenses, like get a tiny home or like get a smaller home, or plant a garden and whatever other things we talked about during this. But then also, you know, if you got a car that's just a depreciating asset that's taking up the majority of your net or of your expenses, like that's not smart. So try to find ways to like tighten up your budget, live within your means, and then put the rest in Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is going to the moon, baby.
Exactly.
No, that's not actually what we're saying. We're saying like minimum of 3 to 5%, 1 to 5% dollar cost average on Bitcoin, And that way you won't have to look at it for 3 years. I like to
I
say
think
5
Bitcoin's
years.
on the moon, and we're actually going to Mars.
Ooh, we're going to Mars. We're joining Elon Musk with a 0.25 BTC.
Yeah.
Yeah, and don't look at the price. And you know, if you see the price and it's up 10x, then sure, sell some.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, thanks a lot for coming on. We're gonna have to have another another one of these episodes. There was a couple of subjects we never got to loop back to, but good chat.
It was
for
a good
sure.
time. Yeah, definitely. Great
next time, when's the next time you're in Canada?
Well, don't know with this COVID stuff. But,
right.
Normally I'd be there in the summer.
Well, we'll have to hang out next time.
It won't be this summer. Yeah, definitely. We should get together next time I'm there.
All right. Thank you very much. And where can people find you? Do you want people to find you or what?
It's usually hard to find me, but I am on Twitter at PointBiz1.
PointBiz1.
Yeah, that's my handle.
And what about a website?
btccuracao.com, BidAddress.org.
BidAddress.org. So do you still recommend people use paper wallets?
I do, yeah.
So that's
I try to teach newbies about mobile wallets, but then after they get too much on their mobile wallet where they don't feel comfortable, paper wallet is a great thing. And I also like Ledger hardware wallets. So those are the three avenues of advice.
Awesome. Well, BidAddress.org and PointBiz1. Thanks, Peter.
Take care. You're welcome.